Thank you very much indeed for the warm welcome. I'd like to welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, guests of our city. Welcome to Berlin. Welcome to this conference, Berlin Questions 2021. This is a conference format that we've actually had for quite a few years now. It has been a great forum for exchange to foster our networks and to augment cooperation. And this is exactly what we will be doing this year too. The new now, this is the motto. We will look into the immediate, present and future, talk about the challenges that we face. And the moderator just said it, COVID, the pandemic, of course, all of this is still keeping us very busy as it did over the past 1.5 years. But we are seeing change. We've learned our lessons. We've learned how to cope, and we're already drawing the first conclusions from the pandemic. And going forward, look at our next challenges ahead, prepare ourselves for them. But we also see that we've reached a point where we can finally encounter, get back together. So it's wonderful indeed to have all of you here, 200 people, I think. But of course, also all of you back at home in your offices who are with us today virtually. Many of them would have loved to join us. The mayors that we invited were very enthusiastic about the invitation, but most of them were unable to join us because of COVID restrictions across the world. But there will be 11 mayors joining us over the next few days from all over the world who still want to be part of the conference, even though it's just virtually. Here in Berlin, I'd like to welcome the Deputy Mayor from Warsaw. I'm delighted to have him because we too are celebrating 30 years of a city partnership in these days. And this also reflects that we're not starting off fresh. There's a lot we can actually tap into within our international cooperation, our city networks. So in the next few days, we will talk about the challenges we need to tackle together, especially the challenges we face in the cities. When I became mayor 7 years ago, the Habitat 3 process was just starting off, settlement programs. We were talking about how large settlement areas were developing. And what really surprised me back then, people were talking about the cities, but not with them. And this is something that really changed. Thanks to our networks and city partnerships, we made sure that we received a place at the table. And I think this can actually be felt now. The decision makers now in the cities are having a voice. They are talking about the transformational processes that we are seeing in the cities, but they are also giving an input to our national governments, telling them what we need to be prepared for. So it wasn't a matter, of course, that the cities have a place at the table, but it is right that they have. Of course, cities are not just only home to problems. Berlin is actually quite a small city with 4 million inhabitants. You have cities where you have 20, 25 million inhabitants. Of course, that creates problems, how to provide healthcare, education for people, strengthen our communities. But as cities, we can also give answers. We are centers of science and higher education and learning, places where experiences are made about what works and what doesn't work. So the exchange between metropolises is of utmost importance. And of course, COVID was a huge challenge for all of us, a massive problem. It had many sacrifices. There were many sacrifices we made. But I think it also brought things to the fore. The transformational processes we are all facing. And of course, the digital transformation is on everybody's lips. COVID made many problems more evident. And from a Berlin perspective, I can see that we experienced that our administration, for instance, our schools were not well prepared for the future. A lot remains to be done. We need to work on certain skills and expertise, especially in the administrations. But what is even more interesting is what impact will the digital transformation have, for instance, on our work lives. Our work lives have already changed dramatically, but they will continue to do so. Certain professions will completely disappear. New professions will emerge. How can we qualify people for them to ensure that they find their place in the workforce? When we talk about remote working, it sounds very charming, very exciting, but is this really something everybody can do? That everybody has the right conditions to implement? Do people have access to further education, to training for them to find their place? Another topic is housing. This too was further put attention on because of COVID. People need more space when they work from home for their families, if their children stay at home. We all know that in growing cities, it is of utmost importance to create new housing. Metropolises are getting denser and denser, but shouldn't we look even beyond that? How do we deal with the privatization of land? How do we deal with land in general? Land is the greatest good a city has. It cannot be multiplied. It is the essential resource for hospitals, for education, for schools, for kindergartens. And public space is being privatized. How do we respond to this? Do we say stop, or will we act as a partner to these private companies? Talking about the whole sector of healthcare, of course, the medical sector, healthcare, has helped us so much during the pandemic and literally saved lives of millions of people during the pandemic. Scientists and researchers supported us. Without scientists and researchers, where would we be now in the pandemic? Without the vaccines and the answers to the problems we faced. But again, beyond the specific tasks we have to tackle, what do we learn from all of this? In Berlin, for instance, we learned that we need to pay for healthcare, for creating the right framework conditions to respond to a crisis, that we cannot see hospital beds just from a business point of view. Maybe we have to pay for beds to keep them empty, to be prepared for future challenges. We learned that science and research are not sectors that stand for themselves somewhere at the fringes of our political agenda. No, they are at the heart of what we're dealing with, and that regards many other areas as well. How do we want to find answers in transport policy, integration policy, education policy, answers to what we are facing without science? I have no idea. I think scientists and researchers have to be at the interface of finding answers to the questions of the future, especially for us politicians and for us in the administration. And then there's another conclusion I'd like to draw. Those scientists, just as journalists, have to be able to work freely. That sounds quite evidently as a matter of course. Of course, everybody can do research on what they do. Policymakers do not interfere. But is that really true? Are we not really seeing, when we look around ourselves in the world, that their freedom is being curtailed? I experienced that in Berlin. As the Senator for Higher Education and Research, I was delighted to see that many scientists and journalists were moving to Berlin to find a new home because they would have a free working environment here. Lovely. But this tells us something. They are leaving their home country because they are not able to work freely in their home countries. And this is something we need to speak up against. Freedom of demonstration, freedom of thought, freedom of research and science. This is the bedrock of a good development of our societies. And of course, a pillar of our multicultural, multi-religious, multinational, multicultural societies, communities in our cities that attract people from all over the world. This freedom needs to be fought for and won, because this is fundamental for our togetherness. I think you can transfer these conclusions to many other areas, education, for instance, transport, if you want to formulate answers to future questions. And this is exactly what we want to do today and in the days to come. We've invited experts, stakeholders from across the world who are joining us to speak from their perspective: urban planning, science and academia, culture. You and they are here to talk to one another, to exchange on these things. And let me be very frank, they're also here for us to learn from them, to learn from one another, and for us to further expand our networks. So let me say a big thank you to all of you for being here. I think this is exactly what these next days will be all about. On the one hand, yes, we do have a situation in where we are able to meet again, to breathe a sigh of relief. On the one hand, of course, be safe and keep certain measures in place, but meet again and talk about different things than COVID. This is a message that Berlin really wants to send with this conference. But what's also important is that we have come together to work on a good sense of community in our cities. I'm delighted that you're all here, and I look forward to a conference that will not just be over after 3 or 4 days, but a conference that will provide lessons learned for years to come. On this note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again. A warm welcome to Berlin. Enjoy yourselves and the best of success with the conference.